What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, January 5th, 2017. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. Very busy news day. Our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone and put you on the line. And quick program note, the Lady Claire will be joining us in our third hour tomorrow. Right now, obviously, the big story is this absolutely horrific kidnapping and torture of apparently a mentally impaired white gentleman up in Chicago by four black youths who basically kept him tied up, threatened him with a knife, made him drink out of a toilet, and it went on for 48 hours, and to make it worse, they actually made videos that they put out on Facebook. I've seen at least 3 different videos of what was going on there. And all during this assault on the video, you can hear the perpetrators yelling, F-word Donald Trump, F-word white people, and it's just shocking and horrific. And this is basically, it's a disgusting attack in Barack Obama's backyard. It's a Trump-hating race crime against a defenseless white person, a young man. Remember all this talk we've been hearing about, white genocide? Yes, if all the straight white men were gone, it would be a good thing. And these young black Americans have shamed their entire country with this behavior. It is depraved, absolutely. And to nobody's surprise, hate crime charges have been filed against these 4 suspects, which means each single blow to this victim will be seen as a separate count of assault and battery. These 4 individuals are looking at serious jail time, and they should, for what they did to this guy. Now, apparently the ringleader for all of this was a young lady named Brittany Herring, also goes by the name of Brittany Covington, and she was out on bail awaiting trial for shoplifting. You would think somebody in that circumstance would be well behaved, but apparently over on Facebook she was just screaming about, I have to go to court, and it's just such an inconvenience. Now, here's where it gets really kind of ugly. CNN, initially, before the hate crimes charges were filed or announced, they were out there trying to, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. CNN's Don Lemon said, I don't think it was really evil. They just had, bad upbringing and, a lack of home time. And apparently Matt Lewis was having none of it and said, you just wrap your head around this evil. That's what it is. It's brutality. And it absolutely was against this guy. And then raising on a busted flush, CNN commentator Simone Sanders tried to lay the blame for this on Donald Trump. Oh, it's all his fault because of his inflammatory rhetoric and, this white nationalist view and everything. And by the way, Simone, just for the record, Donald Trump has booked the marching band from Talladega College, a black college in Alabama, to play for his inauguration. So I think it's time to let that whole racist white nationalist thing go away, because it didn't work to get Hillary elected, and it's not working now. And what we're seeing, what we saw on those videos, is the end result of all of the race baiting and Black Lives Matter and the deliberate campaign to stir up racial friction during all of 2016 as part of Hillary Clinton's campaign. And we're now seeing what it has brought us to, where these black youths apparently thought this was acceptable behavior. And of course, Obama and Hillary and the Democrats really didn't care if this was going to happen after the election was over. It was just, let's get Hillary in, and who cares what happens after that. Now, the other big news going on, of course, is that the Senate is having hearings on Russian hacking, and they're still out there trying to push this thing. It's all over the place. And the reality is that they've got zero evidence about it at all. They have no evidence. All they're doing is coming up with stories, and the stories are constantly changing, trying to convince America that Russia is a threat, justifying military escalation against them. And they're not getting any traction. You see them actually thrashing around. Now, Trump is out there saying that as far as he's concerned, WikiLeaks is the credible source when it comes to where WikiLeaks got the DNC and Podesta emails. And, you know, Trump is basically backing Assange and is saying that the real problem here is twofold. First of all, the Democratic National Committee obviously had very poor security. John Podesta's password was password. And if somebody was able to walk out of those offices with a flash drive with all of this email on there, that was a security lapse. And the other aspect is we all need to remember, nobody has ever come out and said that all of these emails were fake. And we have to remember that the root cause of that whole scandal was not the leak. It was the fact that Hillary Clinton and her campaign actually went on out and wrote those things. They wrote all those emails themselves. Everything that's in them represents the crimes and corruptions of Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC, including the revelation that corporate media was giving Hillary the debate questions ahead of time, helping her steal the nomination from Bernie Sanders, helping her try and steal the election from Donald Trump. And that's what we have to be focused on, not where the emails came from, what was in them. And, of course, that's absolutely what they don't want you thinking about. We're going to take a second to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. So we're seeing all these articles out here. Will somebody actually come up with solid evidence of Russian hacking influencing the U.S. election? Because that's the big thing. Oh, it influenced the election. Trump isn't legitimate. Russia helped him. And remember, the CIA has rigged and tampered with elections in 81 other countries. They openly admit it. But apparently the attitude there is our election rigging is good and Russia's election rigging is bad. And what we're getting now, according to NPR, supposedly this report that's coming on out on Russia hacking is being issued in three versions. One for the public, a classified version, and then a highly compartmented version where some of the findings will be off limits even to U.S. officials who have top secret security clearance. In other words, they're setting the stage for, well, we've got evidence, but we can't show it to you. You're just going to have to trust us. No, in point of fact, we're not going to trust you, not after Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, Assad's weapons of mass destructions, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, Lusitania, Pearl Harbor, blah, 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 blah. No, we're not going to trust you. You don't deserve our trust. Now, this Senate committee meeting is being chaired by John McCain, who's out there screaming about Russian cyber attacks against the U.S. are an act of war. If you try and destroy the fundamentals of democracy, then you've destroyed a nation. And, well, if you really feel that way, Songbird, here's your rifle. Here's your parachute. And while we are on the subject of destroying democracy, would anyone care to comment on the massive election fraud uncovered during Jill Stein's recount, all of it favoring Hillary Clinton? Isn't that a threat to our democracy? Or is it only a problem when somebody outside the country is stealing the election? And by the way, just because I was in the mood to do so, I dug up that video that was finally released. They claimed it was misplaced all these years, where John McCain did make propaganda recordings for North Vietnam. He was not a hero. He didn't resist. He went along and said, yeah, sure, whatever. And only Richard Nixon's pardon saved him from being tried for treason. Now, Director of National Intelligence James Clapper was out there before this Senate Armed Services Committee meeting trying to really sell this idea of the Russian threat. And he made the comment that Russia Today reporting on U.S. problems is part of a multifaceted Russian campaign to undermine the elections. They're trying to sell that idea that Russia had an influence on the election. But then ultimately, James Clapper was forced to admit that in point of fact, there was no hacking by Russia on the actual election results. The vote tallies were not changed by any means that can be traced back to Russia. Certainly can be traced to Hillary Clinton's campaign. And they've changed the story yet again, because as you know, Julian Assange is out there repeatedly saying these emails did not come from Russia, they did not come from any nation state, it was an inside leak. And so now, in order to get around that, to marginalize Assange's comment, the new, improved version of Washington's story, version 3.2, the golden cut, is that Russia gave the emails to a third party who then gave them to WikiLeaks without telling them it came from Russia. And that's why Assange doesn't think Russia had anything to do with it. It's all a devious, evil plot by that villain Putin. And here is the bombshell that everybody has been waiting for. The FBI never actually looked at the DNC email servers. They didn't bother to conduct a forensic analysis of the servers to look at who was actually getting into them or where the data was going. They relied on a report produced by a contractor in the employ of the Democratic National Committee. Because we here at the FIB are not interested in actual facts, we're here to help sell the agenda. Now, as you know, Trump is scheduled to meet with Brennan and Clapper on Friday, supposedly to get his autographed copy of this report that claims Russia was hacking the DNC emails and the election, even though there's no proof. But the word is coming on now that Donald Trump is probably going to be treating Brennan and Clapper much the way he treated the heads of the network news when they had their meeting, which is he's going to call them on the carpet and lay it on out. And we are hearing that Donald Trump is planning to revamp the top U.S. spy agencies and reorganize them, bring them back under the control of the executive branch. Of course, John F. Kennedy tried to do that, and we know what happened to him. So, Trump's security had better be doubling up on the coffee here. Chuck Schumer has actually warned Donald Trump. U.S. intelligence officials have all kinds of ways to get back at you. They can feed you bad data that leads you to a disastrous policy decision, which is what the CIA did to Kennedy. They lied to him about that whole Bay of Pigs, about how the Cuban people were going to rush down to the beach and join with the Cuban brigades and kick out that commie Fidel Castro. And it actually did not happen. Needless to say, this issue of a possible Trump assassination is being talked about by a lot of observers. Paul Craig Roberts, for example. And yes, it's a real danger because Donald Trump is a threat to as much, if not more, of the establishment as John F. Kennedy was. What is really alarming, though, is seeing how the liberal whiners are fully on board with this thing. Over at Marshall High School in San Antonio, the teachers are allowing students skits portraying the assassination of Donald Trump. And remember those riots in California following Trump's election victory? They had graffiti all over the place. Kill Trump, kill Trump, kill Trump. And remember, the president-elect is protected by the same laws that protect the president. These people should have been arrested and thrown in jail. And believe it or not, the Hillaryites are still not quitting. They're not giving up. Salon is reporting that there is this supposed bipartisan organization out of concern for the integrity of the election is trying to make a stink, saying that 50 of Donald Trump's electors were illegally seated as electoral college members because they did not live in the congressional districts they represented or held elective office in states that legally bar dual office holders. And this is a Hail Mary, last desperate gasp. Most of these people they're talking about are coming from states where the electors, whoever they are constrained to vote with the state's popular vote, the election result winners. And this really is desperation, or just another attempt to try and discredit Donald Trump by the whiners and crybabies and the buttercups and the snowflakes, the liberalologists. And their target is basically tomorrow, which is when Congress formally accepts the Electoral College numbers and counts them themselves and declares the winner of the election. In years past, it's been a pro forma exercise, like the Electoral College itself. Unfortunately, in this age of Hillary and the liberalologists, it's yet another battleground to either get Trump out of the presidency or at least tarnish his image before he even sets foot in that Oval Office. Now, under the rules of the 12th Amendment, which govern this whole process, if Congress, for any reason, were to reject the Electoral College vote, the election gets thrown into the Congress. Congress is limited to considering only the top 3 candidates from the Electoral College results. That would be Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, and Colin Powell, who got 3 Electoral College votes from faithless electors who deserted Hillary Clinton. Now, the GOP-controlled Congress is not going to vote Hillary in. Colin Powell is not really situated to replace Donald Trump, so the Congress will vote Trump into the White House anyway. It's just more of this spoiled brat behavior. Oh, I didn't get what I want. I'm going to cause a ruckus here. Now, getting on back to Trey Gowdy, and I got to tell you, I absolutely wish that he had been named as Attorney General. But he's still out there swinging, and he's doing good work. And yesterday, I didn't get to talk about it because we ran out of time. But I put a video on WhatReallyHappened.com. You may have to scroll to page 2 to see it, where he's literally grilling the IRS over the fact that they destroyed federal records after they had received subpoenas and orders to preserve data. And the IRS was out there saying, well, it was just 2 low-level workers, and they didn't know. They were just recycling the tapes and everything. And Trey Gowdy puts him on the spot. Wasn't there somebody at the IRS that was in charge of preserving the data? Well, yeah, there was, but he's not with the IRS anymore. And remember what I used to say about Obama and most politicians suffering from narcissistic personality disorder? Well, he just validated my analysis because apparently President Obama has just awarded himself the Defense Department's Distinguished Public Service Medal. I mean, that's right out of a banana republic where the leader just tells his, give me this medal, give me this, I want this, I want all kinds of things on my chest here to polish my legacy, because he doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of anything else, especially with the Nobel Peace Prize Committee now openly saying they regret giving him that Peace Prize. Now let's talk about the corporate media. Big stink yesterday where CNN put out this video clip from one of their shows in which one of our intelligence officials, I forget which one it was, Rudd I think it was, declared that Assange was a pedophile. And WikiLeaks said you've got 48 hours to do a 1-hour retraction or we're going to sue. CNN has now issued an apology. It's not an hour long. It's very brief. They're hoping nobody will notice it. But they've announced they went ahead and deleted the tweet that included the video clip from the New Day show. And they admit there's absolutely no evidence to support the allegation that Julian Assange is a pedophile. They're down to insults and ad hominem, which is where you go when you no longer have facts, logic, and law to back up your position. You call the other guy names, and that's clearly what CNN was trying to do. We're going to take a break for commercials here, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, breaking news. Actually, breaking news is the name of an NBC company, and it's linked to another NBC company called Medium that is in serious trouble. And we'll be talking about that a little bit further in the show during the economic news here. But breaking news is shutting down. the corporate media is beginning to dissolve. They've lost the majority of their audience because nobody trusts them anymore. And the people who have been covering all the losses of corporate media are starting to put their checkbooks away with the realization that corporate media has failed in its assigned task to control the minds of the American public. That was the one lesson everybody woke up to during that general election. So they're struggling. They're struggling. Apparently Megyn Kelly, in her move to NBC, is actually having to accept a lower paycheck. Poor dear. Apparently she wanted $25 million a year at Fox, and Fox said, a little too rich for us in this day and age here. Alrighty, let's turn to the war zones. Emphasis on the plural. Story out of southfront.org. The Syrian conflict is heading to its turning point. I actually think it's past that. The war has shifted, the initiative has shifted back to Assad and to Russia. And the U.S. actions in the area are only increasing the confusion. And perhaps not unconnected with that, there's been a terror attack outside a stadium in Jabla, Syria. 9 killed, 15 injured. Now, the United States has been, up until recently, using the Incirlik Air Base in Turkey. And Turkey has begun to question that because planes are coming in and they're going on out. But the U.S. won't say where they're going. The U.S. claims that they're helping Turkey against the Syrians, but nobody really knows. Russia is pointing out that for some mysterious reason, the U.S. planes still refuse to bomb the oil processing equipment under the control of ISIS, which is where they get a huge amount of their money to continue their war. And Turkey was calling this a crisis of confidence, and apparently the crisis has escalated because as of now, Turkey has officially turned down all U.S. military help for its troops in Syria and has asked Russia to take over the role of air support. And again, I don't think this is a coincidence. There was an explosion in Izmir, 2 killed, including a police officer. It's all fallen apart. They're in thrash mode there. Now then, Turkey's deputy prime minister has come on out and said that they have concluded foreign intelligence services were linked to that Istanbul club massacre. In other words, somebody staged it. Remember, the witnesses said the guy who walked in there seemed very professional, very military training, military bearing, somebody who'd obviously spent his life shooting and killing other people. And apparently somebody was trying to send a message to Turkey, start cooperating with us, or there'll be more terror attacks. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more. Over in Lebanon, President Aoun is claiming the Mossad is behind the killing of a Lebanese citizen over in Angola. The world is waking up to how the world has really been working. And that does represent a significant failure of the corporate media to hide these things. Yet another case of something not being hid successfully is that Washington is behind India's brutal and disastrous experiment of abolishing cash, because the Indian government declared the 2 largest denomination bills invalid, which represented 80% of all circulating cash, and then they started confiscating gold, and India's economy is locking up. And apparently, this was all being directed from Washington, D.C. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to be talking about the economic news here for a little bit. Apparently, all of this market rigging, metals rigging, is going to start catching up with the people behind it. CEOs of various silver companies are basically preparing to go after the Wall Street banks that were rigging the price of silver. And I imagine it won't be just Wall Street. It'll be London's involved in that. And they're filing a class action lawsuit. And this is going to be huge. And, of course, what the corporate media has been saying all along is, oh, no, gold and silver prices aren't being raised. That's just a ridiculous conspiracy theory. You know, at this point in our history, the corporate media is making being a conspiracy theorist a good thing in the eyes of the people of the world. So, let's see, world's purest silver producer is going to join this class action lawsuit. Now, at this point, and I really do feel bad for Donald Trump. I mean, I know he wanted the job, and I supported him, but he is inheriting an absolute mess in terms of the economy. And it looks like a correction, which is euphemism for a fiery crash, is pretty much unavoidable because of that 11th marble I keep telling you about. Now, when this big crash hits, the people of the world are going to remember how the real, registered trademark, corporate media, and the government kept assuring them the economy was fine. The banks are honest. There's nothing to worry about as long as you let the banks hold all your money, invest in stocks, pay your taxes, and everything will be fine. The people of the world following that crash will remember how the so-called fake independent media has been sounding the warnings about massive fraud and rigging by these banking institutions, and how the illusion of a functioning economy based on that rigged up stock market was just an illusion. How the official unemployment numbers are not even in the same time zone with reality. A major financial crash will trigger the final collapse of trust and confidence in big banks, especially private central banks. A financial crash will trigger the final collapse of trust and confidence in that corporate media. And a giant financial crash will trigger the final collapse of trust and confidence in the government itself. It's unavoidable at this point, and you've got to be making preparations. And that includes investing in some portable store of wealth, silver, gold, small amounts, so it's not being tracked, because remember, when they declare the cashless society, they'll ban silver and gold. They banned gold already in India. They're actually raiding people's homes and taking their gold. Now, there's an article out here at Zero Hedge, Circumvent the Euphemisms, It's Time to Face Reality. The Ponzi scheme of private central banking is about to come on down, and all these PhD economists who swore fealty to Keynesian economics were full of crud. They were. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Graham in South Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, good afternoon. I just wanted to call. I'm a recent listener. I'm new to your program. A friend turned me on to you back right before Christmas in December, and I've really enjoyed your show and hearing the tidbits, and especially your sense of humor. I think it's awesome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate that people are recommending this show and my website to their friends, because that's how the word gets out. I don't have an ad budget.
Right, exactly. Well, I'm glad to be out there and passing the word along.
Well, you're now an official member of Rivero's Rangers, and one of these days we'll get a button or a badge made up here.
I'll get a button or a shirt.
Yeah, something like that.
So I was traveling to Hong Kong in 2014, doing a trip to China, and right before my trip happened, and I bought my tickets previous to knowing that stuff, but that whole that blitz in the media talking about coming to the anniversary of the birth of communism and going into October, November, and I had friends of mine saying, "Oh, you shouldn't go. It's a mess. There's going to be riots and 10,000 people out in the streets and stuff." And I tend to not listen to that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I already spent $1,400 on my ticket. I'm going. Mm-hmm. And got to Hong Kong, took the train downtown, and there was nobody. It was a ghost town. I was actually blown away because I was supposed to be in the heart of what was going on, and that started really awakening me to, a lot of the stuff is kind of fed, because I did look at pictures online on news being reported, and it showed mass amounts of people rioting and, kind of showing their protest to Beijing. and Hong Kong, and I'm like taking pictures in the street live while I'm there, while this is supposed to be going on, and there's nobody in the street. Just normal commerce, waiting for the next morning, same thing. So this reinforced to me that, you know, this fake media that's out there is not coming from the independent media, it's with other source.
Well, that's the corporate media's job. And, you know, while we're naively trusting the corporate media, we wouldn't see the signs of fakery and fraud that was going on. And, you know, now we spot it when they're using a green screen. Now we spot it when they fake a satellite link up and the same car and truck go through the backgrounds of both views. People are now looking for that stuff. It's like if you're a magician and, you know, when you start the show and everybody's going along with the suspension of disbelief and they're being amazed by the card tricks and the rabbit and everything like this. When you make a mistake, that's the end of the show. You're not going to get that audience back. Because from that point on, they're looking to see how you're doing what you're doing. And you might as well just wrap it up and go away. And I learned that one the hard way through my many years of being a professional magician. That, unfortunately, is not an option that the corporate media and our government have. We've seen the cards falling out of their sleeves, and all they can do is keep on shoving more cards up their sleeves. And they're really kind of trapped by this huge network of lies that people are now aware of. Corporate media is trapped by its own business model, which is not the reporting of the news, but the selling of agendas and products and taxes and wars. And basically they're paid these huge salaries to be very convincing liars. That's why they're able to command these multi-million-dollar paychecks. They're very convincing liars. They can read that teleprompter and just sell it right through that camera. You know, it does very well for them and not very good for the country. But again, you know, look at Brian Williams and his embarrassment, and he's still working for NBC. Had to take a pay cut. He's down to only $8 million now, the poor guy. But, you know, I remember during my brief stint as a computer animation instructor, adjunct professor, that was my official title, my classroom was right next door to a classroom that was part of the School for Journalism. And one day I just sort of peeked in through the door, and all they were learning was hair and makeup and how to read a teleprompter and make it look like it's sincere. And that was it. That's what they were being taught.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, even being deployed a few years ago, I was in the Navy Reserve and CB, and we went to a country in the Middle East and on one of the bases, and the promises were we were closing down, we're moving out, getting out of there. And I called my wife on several occasions and said, we're doing nothing but building over here. I don't believe what the media is feeding you. And they only put CNN on the TVs over there. You couldn't get Fox News. You couldn't see any conservative news out there. You just had to dig for it. And I'm like, don't believe this crap. You know, we're building over here. We're expanding. And we're supposed to be leaving the country. So, yeah, I just never continue to be surprised anymore, I guess.
No, and again, the fact that the government and the corporate media are lying, it's not a unique incident. It's not shocking. It's business as usual because that's how they've always operated to control us through lies, fraud, and deception. And now it's all falling apart, and they're in a panic, and they don't know what to do. They're in a rush to try and start a war, hoping that if they can get a big war going with Russia and or China, that we, the American people, will just forget all about the lies and the corruption and the Obamacare and any doubts that we might have, and out of sheer loyalty, we'll salute the flag and fling our money and our babies into the war zone. I don't think it's going to work. Yeah. And again, that goes back to Sun Tzu and the art of war.
Right. I wanted to ask you one more thing real quick. Sorry to keep you on the phone, but I've been pro-Israel all my life. And so when we first listened to your show, I was like, this does not sound good. I could agree with you on 90%, but this part I just couldn't. But as you've explained it in your narrative over the last month and a half or whatever, I begin to understand a little bit more about the government, and I agree with that. I think that's accurate.
Yes.
But I definitely, as far as the people of Israel, I have friends that work over there and do humanitarian work and outreach to Palestinians and Jewish people, and they give a good report that there is real bridges being built between common everyday Palestinians and Israelis, and they have good stories for me to tell. So what are we to do with that in the midst of this, hearing this negative report and stuff? Because there's still really positive things that I'm hearing, and I believe in my heart is good stuff. And it's just like the good stuff here in our nation doesn't necessarily get televised or get put out there.
Well, no, it doesn't get put out there. I mean, and again, ordinary people tend to get along. There have been periods throughout history where Christians, Muslims, and Jews have lived together in peace and harmony, each following their own religious traditions, respectful of the others, carrying on commerce and peace. But it's the actions of governments, leaders, rulers, tyrants, that stir up chaos and trouble in order to sell this idea that we need the leaders to protect us from the chaos that's emerging around us. That was what Hillary and Obama were doing this last election year, stirring up all this racial tension, Black Lives Matter, to make everyone feel afraid of the other guy, and then sell Hillary Clinton as the leader who could protect us from ourselves. And it didn't work. She didn't win the election, and now we're seeing the after effects of that with these horrible videos coming out of Chicago.
Right. Yeah, it helps to disseminate, too, because I think, and as I've heard your narrative, I've just heard some of the positive seeds in there, so it helps, because I think the shock value for me at first was alarmist. And it's good to kind of get a little bit more perspective that you got to go slow, like you closed off into your shows. You're like, don't just throw it all at them at once, because you're going to turn them off and they're going to run away. So
yeah,
I appreciate that. So Rivero Rangers Toe.
Well, thank you very much for that, and we're going to let you go and switch over to Fred in Iowa. Aloha, Fred. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hello, Mike. Mike, I presume you're familiar or understand the Hegelian dialectic.
Yes.
Okay. Now, we had Bush Jr. in there, and it was weapons of mass destruction, right?
Yeah, yes.
And took us into a war. Okay? Then, that's all we heard from the media and everything. Shaping us, what we think and how we feel, and get mad at people, okay?
Just like they're doing right now with Russia. It's very obvious Russia hacking is the 2017 version of Saddam has weapons of mass destruction.
All right. Oh, let me say this right off the bat. I have a tremendous respect for your integrity and your honesty, and I damn well mean that. I said that, and I mean that.
Thank you.
Okay, then we got Obama in there. And Obama did say he was going to attack Afghanistan. But everybody voted for Obama. The same damn thing went on before under the Bush administration, the Republicans, only it compounded. And we were fed all this stuff. Now what are we being fed? Trump is a bad guy, everything, but isn't it strange that the Clintons and the Bushes are going to Trump's inaugural ball or whatever?
Well, okay, it's kind of expected and traditional, and originally when Jimmy Carter was the only former president who had agreed to go to the inauguration, the Bushes and the Clintons drew a lot of negative attention over that they were still acting like spoiled children, that the Bush-Clinton narcocracy had been driven from the heights of power. And so they turned around and said, all right, we'll show up so the cameras can take a picture and prove that we were there and we were going through the motions. But I'm waiting to see that close-up shot of Hillary's face, because I have a feeling it's going to redefine the expression, if looks could kill.
They're the same people. We're getting the Hegelian dialectic. And I say that not one person, only one person in 100,000 understands the Hegelian dialectic, because it's happening right to us, right before our eyes.
Well, I think most people understand the concept, even if they don't understand the name. I mean, the Hegelian dialectic is basically declaring something to be a crisis and then offering to sell people a solution. whether it's human-caused global warming or the 2009 when pigs fly flu or anything else. Use the media, use the propaganda machine to say, oh, there's this horrible thing on the way, but you can avoid it if you give us your money in obedience and your children for wars.
I say that things will not change. They will be the same with Trump in there and liable to get worse. I will say this, and this is kind of going out on a limb, but I know prophecy. There ain't going to be a third world war, but there is going to be one hell of a lot of wars. And what I'm trying to get across is this. The Hegelian dialectic is right before our eyes, and most people don't see it. The vast majority of people. Anyhow,
well, I will disagree with you on that. I think 2016 is the year when people around the world began to wake up to these games that are being played. And once people are aware of this trick of creating a crisis out of thin air and then offering to sell us a solution in exchange for money, obedience, and the lives of our children, it stops being effective. Going back to this idea about being a magician, once the audience knows the secret of a trick, they're never going to be fooled with it again, and the same thing applies now. All of the old ways of controlling a population are crumbling before our eyes. We are really transforming the world right now. Fred, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking about the economic news around the world. Now, Marine Le Pen, who's running for president of France, and when she wins, it's just going to pour more salt into Hillary's wounds. And she's the National Front leader, and she's leading in the polls, has announced she wants to take France out of the euro and will redominate France's current debt in a new French currency to break free from that European Central Bank. So, Marine, make sure you're wearing your Kevlar, because if you've read my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, you understand that leaders who go up and against and defy those private central banks, bad things happen to them. And I'm already very concerned about a terror, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more attack in Paris, somewhere around that meeting on the 15th, where they're going to be talking about a Palestinian state. China is signaling it's going to have to start dumping U.S. treasuries to keep the yuan stable. And they're looking at imposing more capital controls on their people. All of these are stopgap measures only. None of them address the core problem, which is that you cannot run an economy on debt without the debt eventually collapsing the economy. You have to go back to a value-based currency. Basically, private central banks are legalized counterfeiting operations. If you were to do what the Federal Reserve does, which is just create money out of thin air, you would go to jail. But these are bankers. They're above the laws of man and God. So, of course, they're allowed to just make as much money as they want. Now, apparently, there is growing support in Congress for passage of this bill ordering a full and complete audit of the Federal Reserve, which the Federal Reserve has been fighting tooth and nail all along, even to the point of threatening that a full audit might actually bring the entire system crashing down. Little veiled warning there. And the reason they're afraid is very, very simple. If the American people learn just how much real wealth has been sucked out of their pockets over generation after generation after generation for the privilege of using the Federal Reserve's pieces of paper with ink on them, they're going to be very, very angry. And they should be. They have been used. Private central banking is not about economics. It's about ruling. It's about enslavement to control people. It's an illegitimate form of governance. It's no more legitimate than rule by divine right or rule by slavery. And like those former failed systems, it only works when you allow yourself to be brainwashed into thinking this is the way the world is supposed to be. And as everybody is now waking up to understanding, especially after last year, The world isn't what you think it is anyway. Got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show for hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about the economic news. And here is an article from Club Orlov Blogspot that really cuts to the chase here. How to make America great again with other people's money. And it's pointing out a very stark reality that is facing the Trump administration. The government is broke. It's hovering on the edge of bankruptcy. It's hopelessly in debt. How are you going to fund the necessary changes to get America going again? We're talking about $2 to $3 trillion necessary immediately to get our infrastructure back up to standards, repair the roads, repair the rails, get the utilities back online, providing safe drinking water across America. There's got to be capital investment to rebuild factories, although a lot of companies are already looking at this border tax idea, and they're starting to come back and build factories here in the United States. And we have to get people back to work. If the United States was still the wealthy nation that it was prior to Reagan's presidency, it would be easy to make our nation great again. But we're broke. And yes, the Federal Reserve can just create much more money out of thin air, but that just kicks that can down the road yet again, because every time the Federal Reserve puts out any more money, it's a loan at interest, and it just makes the problem worse. Trump may find himself forced into the draconian step of nationalizing the Federal Reserve and declaring a jubilee and simply say, we're going to just zero out all this accumulated debt because it's all imaginary. All this money that everybody's being told they owe to the bank is make-believe. It never existed. Let's say you go down to the bank and you say, I want to borrow $1. And they say, okay, here's $1. And then you come back a little while later and you walk into the bank and say, here's your $1. And the banker says, well, where's the 10 cents interest? And you say, it doesn't exist. The only way I can get 10 cents to pay you back is I got to borrow more money and pay you a dime out of that for the interest. And then when I pay this back, there'll be more interest. That's the trap. Up at the top of my website, WhatReallyHappened.com, in the little sub-menu, second line right in the middle, there's a link. The What Really Happened Banker articles all in one chunk. And if you really want to understand what's going on, whether it's the 11th marble, all wars are bankers' wars, how this whole Ponzi scheme got going and why it's so out of control, those are the articles we've written on that subject. And you need to understand what's going on. Forget about what you've been told by school and media about how banking operates, like the unemployment numbers. What you've been told is not in the same time zone with reality. So, another article came out from Natural News concurring. The global debt collapse is going to begin this year. And goes on to say it'll be followed by the rise of fascist totalitarian government. Well, they're already trying to establish fascist totalitarian government, and they're running into trouble. So while I agree the economy is headed for a collapse from private central bank created artificial debt, and when it does happen, the corporate media will scapegoat Donald Trump for it. Oh, we had a wonderful economy at the end of 2016. This is all Donald Trump's. They did the same thing to Herbert Hoover. They dumped the blame for the Depression of the 1930s on Herbert Hoover, but Herbert Hoover did not create the Depression. It was created for him. I disagree with Natural News in that I don't think the attempt to form a global fascist dictatorship to protect the wealth and privilege of the elites is going to succeed. And I go back as a model to ancient Rome, which was also destroyed by out-of-control debt And that empire fragmented and collapsed, heralding the so-called Dark Ages, which were only dark because the rich couldn't plunder the poor as efficiently. Leor Gantz is out there warning that a derivatives war represents a threat to the entire global economy. And here is a classic case of how this economic mess has been created for Donald Trump, because the derivatives damage has already been done. And it was allowed to happen because the government refused to regulate the derivatives market. And derivatives can make you insanely rich when the economy is improving, and when the economy turns, derivatives can ruin you. That's what happened to AIG back in 2008. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about the threat of the derivatives exposure. And it is a very, very real threat. And the reason derivatives became such a problem, again, no regulation. Derivatives are supposed to be about loss mitigation, risk management. But it's actually a wonderful game for those who are on that adrenaline thrill of gambling in that giant open-air casino called Wall Street. And the way, we'll take just one derivative. And by the name, it basically means a financial transaction that draws its value from another financial transaction. Short selling is a form of derivative. The most commonly abused derivative, though, is the credit default swap. And the way it is supposed to work is, if I'm going to invest $10 million in a project, I buy a credit default swap for a small amount of money so that if the investment fails, I can get at least part of my original investment capital back from the credit default swap. That's how it's supposed to work. It's like buying fire insurance for your home, but there's a couple of differences. I can buy fire insurance on my home. I cannot buy fire insurance on my neighbor's home. Common sense says that would be ample motive to sneak over there in the middle of the night with a can of kerosene and some matches. But in derivatives, you can buy credit default swaps against other people's investments. And you can buy them over and over and over again. Another major difference. Regular, regulated insurance companies, car insurance, health insurance, home insurance, fire insurance, all of those, are required by law to keep cash reserves on hand to pay an expected number of claims. The companies that were selling derivatives did not have that requirement. In the heyday of 2008 in the mortgage-backed security run-up, everyone was saying, we don't need to keep any money on hand. These things are never going to get cashed in. Everybody's making money. And then all of a sudden the market turned, and they were all hammered by these credit default swaps. And the problem has not gone away. Nobody really knows what the global exposure to derivatives is right now, except that it exceeds the value of the entire planet at this point. That's how out of control it is. So the rush is going to be on to stick ordinary people with the losses so the rich can keep their ill-gotten gains. Speaking of which, apparently, after years, this all began back in 2011 when MF Global collapsed into bankruptcy and it lost more than $1 billion in their customers' money. And so regulators have reached a settlement with John Corzine, who was in charge of MF Global when it lost all that money. And the settlement is basically $5 million. He lost $1 billion, has to pay $5 million. This from the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. And nobody went to jail. And that is a big part of the problem with all this out-of-control fraud in the financial sector. Very few countries have the gonadal tissue, as it were, to prosecute criminal bankers. They're almost revered. Because banking isn't really a science. It's a religion. It's an arbitrary set of rules made up by the bankers that you are taught to believe in that makes you their economic slave. That's what it is. Have you ever noticed how much bank buildings look like churches? And it's all facade and front. And I learned that when I was back working on Lost. We did a shoot at one of the big banks in downtown Honolulu. And when you're in the area where the customers are, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's just, you just walk in there and say, obviously we can trust this place. Look how much money they've got. Being on the production crew, we got to go behind where the tellers are. And it was a very different story. The wood was all rotted. The veneer was peeling. Holes in the carpets. It's all facade and show. It's a religion. It's not science. So, let's get a little bit more local. Sears, we were talking about Sears yesterday. They're basically going to be closing a whole bunch of their Kmart and Sears stores, amounting to 10% of their current floor space. Now Sears is being forced to sell off their Craftsman tool division for $900 million. That's been one of their steady money makers all along, and they are good tools. And they're having to sell that off for $900 million. Remember, Macy's got burned when they severed ties with Donald Trump, when those since debunked allegations of impropriety with some of the people on his reality show came on out. Oh, we're severing ties with him. We can't have somebody like this representing us. And Macy's sales plummeted. People didn't go there anymore. And they're imploding right now. Macy's is planning to close 63 stores, losing 10,000 jobs. I'll bet you that this coming November, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade is going to be one kid with a bear-shaped helium balloon and a kazoo. Nationwide is getting ready to cut 138 jobs in the Cleveland area, and they actually issued a statement saying that they anticipate many of the affected workers will quickly find new jobs. Sure they will. Apparently an ex-employee over at Snapchat is accusing the company of faking their growth numbers, on which is based its valuation. Now, I mentioned before how breaking news is shutting down. They're linked to another NBC company, Median. Their CEO has announced major layoffs. They're closing a couple of their facilities and basically saying the system is broken. And on that, he is not correct. The system isn't broken. Corporate media is not broken. It committed suicide. It self-destructed by forgetting that the responsibility that comes with freedom of speech is that you report the truth. That's what they forgot. Journalism used to be about keeping people informed. And yes, there's always a little hanky-panky and propaganda going on. But certainly since the Bush administration, corporate media in this country has been non-stop at creating a matrix we all live in, where we think what we're seeing on these flat screens, hearing over the radio, reading in the newspaper represents the real world. And it isn't. It absolutely isn't. And now we've all taken the red pill, and we're awake. We see the wires sticking into us, and how this system exists just to turn us into a supply of labor, wealth, new soldiers, new laborers. We're treated like farm animals. When government and corporate media lie to us the way they do, it demonstrates they have no respect at all for ordinary Americans as human beings. You don't lie to people you have respect for. You lie to somebody that you presume is inferior and is there to be lied to. And that's not the only indication of this attitude problem. Look at the way they describe Americans today. Flyover country, flyover people, the deplorables. Now, there's been this story over in Sweden. Elderly woman in her 80s. Actually, I'm sorry about the age here. Anyway, here's the point. Over the years, this woman had just been setting aside little bits of cash, putting it in the cookie jar, and over the years had accumulated about $12,000, the equivalent of $12,000 US dollars in cash. Now, Sweden's bank just revamped their currency, and everybody was ordered to basically bring their old currency in and trade it for the new bills. So Ethel went on down to the bank to exchange the outdated notes, and the bank refused to give her the new notes because she couldn't prove that she earned that $12,000. I mean, she started saving this stuff back in the 60s where paper receipts for cash just didn't exist. And she went to court. The court sided with the banks that unless you can prove you legitimately own that cash, the bank can keep the cash. And the stress apparently contributed to her demise. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., federal government agencies are basically rushing to fill job openings in anticipation of Trump's hiring freeze. Going to load up all the little bureaucracies here. We're going to get all the congressmen's neppets, get them into jobs now before Trump can let them go. So they're really rocking and rolling, filling up gratuitous positions that don't really accomplish much of anything. Anybody who's been to business management will tell you that the management workforce of any entity, any company, corporation, what have you, should never exceed 10% of the actual workforce. Japanese business, that's the standard. Management is kept small because it is overhead that doesn't actually generate saleable product. Here in the United States of America, we have a huge proportion of people who are involved in the process of government. We have more people in government than we have working in manufacturing. Reminds me of a story I heard years ago about how an American and Japanese company were having a rowing race, and each boat had 10 people, and the Japanese team was 1 coxswain and 9 rowers, and the American boat had a coxswain, a vice coxswain, a quality control manager, standards person, assistant to this, and 1 rower. And then they couldn't figure out why the Japanese kept winning year after year after year. Now, as we all know, Carrie Fisher passed away, heart attack on an airplane, tragically followed by her mother, Debbie Reynolds, just the day after. A little bit of a wrinkle coming out of it. Apparently, the Disney company stands to make $50 million in life insurance benefits on Carrie Fisher. And we know a lot of corporations will take out life insurance policies on their employees, especially key critical employees. In this case, Carrie Fisher had actually signed a deal to reprise the Princess Leia role in another ongoing series of Star Wars franchise movies. And so Disney took the life insurance policy out on her. But they're going to make $50 million, and it's not like they're not going to be able to find somebody who looks like an older version of Princess Leia. Or even do it with computer graphics. You've been seeing it on commercials now. They can replicate historical figures and celebrities now with tremendous, tremendous accuracy. It's a little scary, and it's another reason why you shouldn't believe anything that you see on television. Now, over in Europe, the refugee crisis is really getting into trouble. It isn't just the refugees who are coming across the border illegally. It isn't just the refugees who are raping German women. It isn't just the fact that refugees can't find jobs, and most of them are now on social welfare programs. But apparently more and more of the refugees are suing the German court for permission to bring their families to the EU. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about immigration. We're talking about Merkel. It is rather arrogant of her to have declared her intention to run for another term in office. Her poll numbers are in the Al-Qaeda at this point. Her approval ratings are currently at a 5-year low, and I guess maybe Merkel is going to call up Hillary Clinton and ask if she can borrow the vote riggers and crooked machines and everything like that Hillary was trying to use to become president. Now, up in the town of Rutland, Vermont, the citizens there are upset at their mayor's decision to allow 100 Syrian refugees to settle in that town. And the mayor, Christopher Louris, defending his decision, is saying the town's demographics are declining and they're having trouble recruiting younger workers. And he thinks the refugees will bring cultural diversity, which has happened in Europe with very devastating consequences. Now, you can attract younger workers if you have decent wages and salaries. And I wouldn't worry about that anyway, because I think 2017, we're going to start seeing younger people start to lose this illusion that being in a big city is a cool thing. And, of course, maybe that's my own background. I'm a farm kid myself, and I'm much more comfortable in that environment than I am in cities. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Nick in Southern California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. How are you?
Biodegradable.
Join the club. So you mentioned Princess Leia and the life insurance policy for Carrie Fisher. Now, I want to say the actor's name is Peter Cushing, played Admiral Tarkin. And,
yes.
Governor Tarkin in the most recent. You know, that was all CGI. I think he's passed away.
Yes, he has.
I had to tell my girlfriend that that was CGI. She had no idea.
Well, don't spoil the illusion for her. My curse, having worked in that industry for so long, is I can't actually watch a movie without saying, oh, there was a tearing mat, like, oh, bad road, and the rest of it. But it's been kind of amazing to see the technology grow from what it was when I first got involved with vector graphics back at Robert Abel to what they're able to do today. And it is rather amazing. And there apparently is a growing concern among the professional acting community that the unions now have to demand limits on the use of CGI-created characters in films because they're losing out. And I think, it's still cheaper to have a real-life human being acting in front of the camera. But for certain things like impossible stunts or people who are actually dead or who are, non-human characters like dragons and so forth, it's obviously a good place for it to be used. But I remember some years ago when I was teaching at UH Manoa and somebody brought up that issue in class saying, are we ever going to see movies where all the actors are CGI? And there have been a few, including one I worked on called Final Fantasy, which was an interesting exercise in 3D animation. But from a practical point of view of filmmaking, it is still much less trouble and much less expense to hire actors and actresses to just do what they do in front of the camera, as long as they're not egomaniacs who are just going to make your life miserable.
At a time, and hopefully, it's not too soon. I prefer the real thing.
Well, I prefer the real thing, too. And the reason for that is as realistic as they can make the bodies and the skin texture and everything, the technology in terms of replicating the little subtle movements that actually make somebody seem like they're alive, they still haven't quite got that. For Tarkin, that was okay because he had a stone face to begin with. But for real serious, obviously in Avatar they did a fabulous, fabulous job. It's still my all-time favorite movie. But they were doing that with facial Waldos, where it all began with a real live actor. Motion tracking on the face, motion tracking on the bodies.
I'm not a professional, but I feel like I have an eye for it, and I will say that Governor Tarkin, they did a great job. He did have some pretty good grimacing sneers, and for those of us who do have an eye for it, it kind of makes you appreciate it all that much more.
Well, I'll take a look at it. Generally, I wait until movies are on cable TV before I see them, and so I'll obviously catch that when it comes on out. Got to let you go. Got to do more commercials. Back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, on the thing that happened in Chicago with the 14s, they, I like how they blame Trump, but yet it's the media, Hillary Clinton, George Soros, and people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer that are creating this the division in this country. And not only them, but in the world with Angela Merkel, and they're dividing people on purpose, I think.
Of course they are. That's how they maintain the control. It's divide and conquer. They did the same thing back in the 1960s during the height of COINTELPRO, where they were fanning up racial tension to get the whites and the blacks angry with each other so they could not unite in opposition to the war in Vietnam. And it was all part of that COINTELPRO scandal. And now that they're running up to war with Russia, they don't want us uniting in opposition to any more wars. And so they're playing those same games again.
That's what I was going to talk about next with the Russians. It's so obvious that the more propaganda they use, the more it's unbelievable. You know, like they're pushing it past to where it's so fake now that nobody's believing it. You know, only the diehard small percentage of people believe it because they just have no critical thinking skills. But it is dangerous because, you have our so-called leaders, well, not my leaders, but, John McCain's and all them that know it's a lie, but they're pushing it because they want to keep their own agendas. But it's very dangerous.
It is very, very dangerous. They're literally courting war with Russia, and they're not thinking long-term. They're basically thinking about, if we can get a war going, well, then the American people will forget about all the crimes and corruptions, and, we can just go back to doing what we're doing. And the American people will salute the flag and fling their babies into war, and all will be well.
Hey, Mike, on that terrorist attack in Turkey at the nightclub, I don't know if you heard reports, this was like a couple days ago, about them detaining people from Kyrgyzstan. Now, I don't know if you remember, Boston Bomber was allowed, one of the brothers was allowed to go to Dagestan. I know Russia knocked out a cell about a month ago, but that's where cells are located where they would go to use them as a weapon. So it wouldn't be that hard for them to get them from Kyrgyzstan also because they're cells.
Well, I'm sure that the various government intelligence agencies maintain, basically pre-positioned assets that they can turn on whenever they need to, and they're constantly courting individuals who could be turned and converted, and then when they need a crisis actor who's willing to shoot something up, they just go on out and say, it's time for you to do what you're doing, and just cause a ruckus that way.
And that's all I needed to say, Mike. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks a lot, Dustin. We're going to switch over to Mo in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Michael, that Dustin, man, he's my brother from another mother. Every time I'm going to say something, he says exactly what I think.
Well, it basically shows that we're all basically on the same page here with what's going on. Yeah,
it's kind of like that, that electron you spin, and I don't care how far you go away. There's no distance or time, but it knows. The universe type thing. I don't know.
I think you're trying to blur quantum mechanics with real life, and that's always very, very tenuous to do.
Oh, I think it's a Zeitgeist thing. There is an awakening.
Oh, no question.
What I was going to bring up. Yeah, and you're right on the top of it. But this thing in Chicago with these black gangsters, if you go online, everything is kill these, N-word, and they're just trying to start a race war because I don't think the Russia thing's playing. I'm not saying they didn't do this or they shouldn't have done it, but an autistic white kid and they tortured him and beat him. I mean, how much can you poke white people with guns more than this? You know what I'm saying? It's so obvious.
Well, I'm not sure that they're trying to kick up a race war in the country right now. I really think this was, unfortunately, an after effect of an entire year of race baiting and racial tension building and Black Lives Matter and Baltimore riots and everything, which were trying to create a racial divide to be exploited by Hillary's campaign.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean,
Okay.
that's part of it. That's the canopy. But if you go and look at, web bots or what's online, it's hate for blacks. Whites hate for blacks. Let's kill them. Lock and load, boys. I mean, that's all you hear. It's scary.
It is very scary, and I certainly hope they're not going to try and start a race war in this country, because that would give Obama his excuse to declare a national emergency, martial law, and all kinds of nasty things. And at this point, the people in Washington D.C., and for that matter, the corporate media, they're absolutely going out of their minds that everything that they have known and known how to do for the last half century just will not work any longer, and they're trying to figure out what the heck they're going to do about it.
Well, Mike, if I didn't have you, I mean, it's like you're a touchstone for truth, and I appreciate it. I'll let you go and take some other callers. Thank you, brother.
All right, well, thank you an awful lot. We're going to let you go here and get on back here to the news. Okay, now, we're talking about immigration. We're talking about Merkel's problems. We're talking about this town in Vermont that absolutely does not want any more Syrian refugees to be brought in, no matter what their mayor says. And obviously the mayor is a liberal, because he's talking about diversity would be good for us. Hasn't worked in Europe. Now, the Trump transition team has requested copies of every executive order from the Obama administration on the subject of immigration. And the indications are he's going to declare them null and void, which is, of course, one of his campaign promises, was he was going to put an end to all this nonsense about open borders. Now, Trump is getting a dig in at Barack Obama regarding Guantanamo, as Obama prepares to release 19 more Guantanamo detainees. Now, this is another area where I disagree with Donald Trump, because, again, too much of his worldview is based on what he's been watching on TV news. We know that a lot of the people who are in Guantanamo shouldn't be there. They were shopped out for the reward money. They were shopped out to get rid of them as competition for business or love interests. We know that the tribunal has already cleared something like 1/3 of them, saying they're innocent, they haven't done anything, and still they're being held there because apparently things have been done to them, leaving permanent scars that will be an embarrassment to the United States when the corporate media around the world starts to look at that. But I think Trump needs to pull back and realize that not everybody who's in a CIA torture center deserves to be there. Some of those people are there just because they had a similar name. I mean, look how they pick out drone targets. Oh, that one's too tall. Get him. It's just incredibly sloppy. As we value the America that we wish to make great again, we owe those people the same legal protections that any ordinary American citizen would have. A right to a trial by jury, a presentation of evidence, the right to mount a defense, and to have it all done in public. And we've seen time and time again the abuses of the current system, in which innocent people were sent there. Innocent people were tortured to death by the United States government to find weapons of mass destruction which never existed. For all you Kafka fans out there, you'll get a thrill from that one. If we're going to make America great, part of that process is going to be the U.S. government has to start owning up and accepting responsibility for many of the things that they have done. And it's time to make things right, to make amends, to let these people go, give them enough money to have a nice, comfortable life that was taken away from them. But as long as we have people like John McCain and Lindsey Graham who are out there saying war is good, let's torture the people, it doesn't really matter. In fact, I want copies of the videotape so I can watch them at night. There are people in our government who are very deserving of a trip to The Hague and the International Criminal Court. And we cannot allow them to escape simply because it sets a bad precedent for future generations of Americans. Oh, I'm the president now. I can torture people. I can murder people with drones in countries we're not even at war at. Wow, this is going to be fun. Now, the other day I was mentioning how we the people are the highest authority in this country, according to the Constitution. It says right up at the top, we the people. With that comes the fact that ultimately we are responsible for the behavior of this government. And we fail that responsibility. We fail that duty if we don't stand up and hold them to account for what they've done, if we don't stand up and condemn their actions. And it's not anti-American to say bad things about the U.S. government any more than it's anti-Semitic to criticize the actions of Israel's government. Bad actions are bad actions. Violations of the Constitution are violations of the Constitution. There's nothing personal here. So, now then, let's get on to some other subjects here as we come up to the end of the hour. Human-caused global warming. They're talking about a mammoth snow leading to an epic season at the Sierra Resort, and of course they're talking about Mammoth Mountain. And the videos were just amazing how intense the snow is. And all these ski resorts are getting happy. Business is booming. People are hitting the slopes early this year, except, of course, for those resorts in Montana that had to close yesterday because it was simply too cold to ski, with a minus 40-degree wind chill. And still the carbon Nazis are out there saying, oh, yes, the world is still warming. It's cold where you are. We understand it's cold where you are. That's a regional variation. That's the new buzzword. Everywhere that you point to and say, it's cold, it's setting cold weather record, well, that's a regional variation. But trust us, after all, we're the government, and we're telling you the world is broiling, and it's your fault. And you can atone by giving us more of your money and obedience. Now, interestingly enough, last week I was talking about this volcano up in the Aleutian Islands, Bogoslov, which is back on red status right now. It erupts, then quiets, then erupts again. And I was expressing concern over this lava that was hitting the ocean and forming what is called a lava bench or shelf, and concern that if it were to break off in a big chunk, that it could lead to a possible tsunami. And surprise, 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 we had it happen here in Hawaii, down on the big island where the lava from Kilauea's eruption is going into the ocean, and it has built these very giant lava shelves extending out over the ocean, and there's nothing underneath to support them. And 22 acres of one of these shelves collapsed into the ocean on New Year's Eve. The resulting waves were 4 stories high. Fortunately, it was such a small area that the waves dispersed and didn't cause any problems. And there was a little incident there that I need to mention, because I've talked about coming to Hawaii before and visiting here and everything. Apparently, the park rangers had roped off that whole shelf area. It's down by Kaanapali. And if you watch a lot of shows about Hawaii's volcanoes, you've probably seen Kaanapali, even if you don't recognize the name. It's the town on the eastern end of the lava flow that has been partly eaten by the volcano. And at one point, they literally moved part of the town, then the volcano caught up, and there are sections of road where the lava has gone across and hardened, and it's just impossible to remove it. Congealed lava, the type of lava we have here in Hawaii, has the consistency of poured concrete. If you could tame it, it would make a great building material. And so it's no surprise that the U.S. government likes to tunnel into these volcanic mountains for their secret underground bases and so forth. But I digress. Apparently, 5 visitors stepped across the rope barricade to get a better look at the lava bench that was collapsing into the ocean. It was collapsing in sections. Didn't go down all at once, but just in sections. And the park rangers chased them out. Just 15 minutes later, the place where they had been standing on the wrong side of the ropes fell into the ocean. And I'm mentioning this because every time we talk about Hawaii and coming on out, yes, it is a national park, but it is still an active volcano, and those ropes are not for decoration. Frankly, considering how dumb some tourists can be, I'm amazed that we lose as few of them as we do, and that, of course, is a testament to the quality of the park rangers down there at Volcanoes National Park. And if you come here to Hawaii, I strongly recommend you see it. You're never going to get that close to an active volcano ever again in your life. But remember, it is an active volcano, and be safe. It's not just a walk in the park. You've got to have proper shoes, plenty of water, and you obey those signs. And if you see a park ranger running, you try and catch up, because they know more than you do. Apparently, a pro-life individual who was outside a Planned Parenthood office handing out information on alternatives to abortion was arrested for domestic terrorism, apparently advocating for adoption is now considered an act of domestic terrorism when it cuts into the profits of Planned Parenthood. Which tells you, again, we're all basically considered livestock by the government, by the elites, by the liberalologists. They don't see any difference between an unborn child and a piece of chicken. Put it on that white plastic tray, wrap it in plastic, sell it. So we're going to take a break for commercials here, and we'll be back with a phone call. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Here we're going to take a phone call. Mike in Brazil, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I was going to ask you, what do you make of this thing in Seattle? This councilwoman apparently is organizing a massive disruption on Inauguration Day, and she actually has a Facebook. Well, the movement has a Facebook page. And she's actually using public funds to engage in this political activity, which is prohibited. And I was wondering, why isn't she charged with misappropriation of public funds and sedition, inciting to violence? I mean, these people get away with a lot of stuff, and I want to know why.
Because basically that government is liberal, and they're going to look the other way. People are breaking the rules. That seems to be an attitude that is common to the liberalologists anyway. We're serving a higher purpose, therefore it's okay for us to break the laws and behave immorally, unethically, and illegally. But frankly, I don't know what they're hoping to gain with all of this showboating for the inauguration, because frankly, I think the American people as a whole, and certainly people around the world, are getting pretty sick and tired of the whining and crying from the liberals, the childish behavior that is fully on display. And the liberals understand, the Democrats understand, they don't really have anybody up and coming who's going to be a significant player for the presidency for quite a while. They've damaged their credibility, and the more they whine and cry and throw tantrums, the worse damage they're inflicting on their public image. We could literally see the Democratic Party collapse from all of this nonsense, leaving us a one-party nation like the former Soviet Union, and I would like to avoid that. I'm not happy with the two-party system, but it's better than a one-party system. I'd like to go back to as many parties as we've got going system, which is how the nation started.
Yeah, me too. Another thing, I thought that Washington State was a pretty much conservative area. I never realized that it's basically a liberal state.
Well, once you get outside the cities, it's very conservative, but inside the cities are where, you have all the government, and it tends to be liberal there.
Yeah, also, I want to make a mention here. There was a caller the other day, a couple of days ago, and he mentioned me, like Mike from Brazil. and he wanted, I believe he wanted to know what happened to Dilma Rousseff here in Brazil. Okay, in case he's listening, Rousseff actually was the victim of a soft coup engineered by the United States government through none other than the vice president today, which is Michael Temer. And the guy was an informant for the CIA. He was a CIA asset, basically. And he was working hand in hand with the CIA office in the United States Embassy. And he's been doing this for at least 2 decades.
Okay,
and
well,
how he ended up to be the...
Okay, Mike, I'm going to have to put you on hold for the station identification. Do not hang up. I'm coming right back to you after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking with Mike in Brazil, and we're going to have a little more time during this segment for you to give us the story on this coup against Rousseau, which tracks back, as usual, to the United States government.
Okay, the situation is as follows, okay? Rousseff was accused of mismanagement of funds, which is a charge which is totally ludicrous because almost the entire government of Brazil is guilty of the same thing. Why they chose to kick her out is because she was getting too close to Russia and China, you know, the BRICS.
Yes.
So like you said in one of your shows, they wanted to remove the B from BRICS. And this is one reason. Secondly, she refused suggestions by the United States government to make certain areas of the economy available to Western investors, and she kind of like backed off from that proposal, and this added another nail in her coffin because you know, anybody who stands up against the United States government is bound to lose. We all know that. So basically, she was charged with mismanagement of funds. Michael Temer has a lower approval rating than Jill Stein. He's actually below 2% approval rating, and now they're starting an investigation, 23 counts of corruption, worse than Dilma, and which makes you wonder, why was Dilma deposed when this guy is 100 times worse than she was? And basically, this your listener, the listener of the show, asked the question, so I'm trying to be as brief as possible. And another thing I was going to ask you, what do you make of the special forces being deployed to the Russian border?
Well, we were certainly...
It's really dangerous now.
Yeah, it is very dangerous, and a lot of people are very concerned about it. We got a lot of calls about it yesterday. We're seeing this massive buildup of troops and weapons all along Russia's border, and all the time we're being assured by CNN, we're countering Russian aggression. Russia's being aggressive, therefore... And it's nonsense, okay? If we saw Russian tanks on the Canadian side of our northern border or on the Mexican side of our southern border, I'd say, okay, Russia's being aggressive. If we saw Russian warships tooling around the Gulf of Mexico, I'd say, yeah, Russia's a potential threat. Russia's inside its own borders, minding its own business. It's the U.S. trying to provoke this war with Russia for a variety of reasons. First of all, the U.S. has to destroy the ruble and the yuan, because they're continuing to displace the U.S. dollar in global trade and banking. And without that constant stream of other nations coming on into the Federal Reserve to borrow U.S. dollars at interest, there's nothing else left to support our economy. Our manufacturing's in decline. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. And, of course, the conventional wisdom in Washington, D.C. is a major war will unify the American people behind the leadership. But then the conventional wisdom last year was the candidate with the most money was going to win the election. So this is a time when the conventional wisdom needs to be really re-examined very, very carefully before somebody makes an irrevocable mistake. I don't
know. The way I'm looking at it is that the United States is actually treading on very thin ice. And I don't know how long Putin is going to put up with this. Like you said, maybe he's waiting until Trump gets his sworn in.
I'm certain that Putin is waiting until the 20th, as we all are. The concern is that the United States may try some kind of a false flag, say Russia did it, we're at war. We've got John McCain in that Senate hearing basically saying that Russia's cyber attacks on the United States are an act of war. They're already attacking us. We have to attack them. And maybe they didn't do all that much right now, but it's just a taste of what's going to happen. Like I said, this is a replay of Saddam's weapons of mass destruction lie that got us all hot and bothered for war with Iraq. But they've worn it out. When they tried it with Assad and sarin gas, they didn't get any traction with it. And so why they think they're going to get traction on Russia's hacking is a mystery, unless they're planning on shutting down the Internet and blaming Russia for it.
As I understand, the election process is pretty much offline. Even though if the Russians would have really wanted to hack into the system, they had to have physical access to the machines in order to hack them. But since none of that is possible, then these people go on their rant saying that Russia did this and Russia hacked, but they refuse to provide the evidence. What is the evidence? And if you call for the evidence, they call you a kook.
Yeah, there's no evidence. Well, they're already shifting away from this idea that Russia hacked the election because of the very point that you raised, and they're going back and focusing on how Russia was behind the leaked DNC and John Podesta emails, because they're now saying that the release of those emails influenced the election. Well, yeah, anytime you find out the true character of a politician, it's going to discourage you from voting for them. But they're still trying to say that this was Russia. Julian Assange keeps saying, no, it was not Russia. So the story has shifted again, where now the U.S. government is claiming that Russia gave the emails to a third party who then passed them on to WikiLeaks without informing them that they came from Russia. So they're basically trying to discard what Julian Assange is saying by saying he didn't realize he was a Russian dupe. And they keep changing the story. But none of this is going to have any traction on the American people unless there's some kind of an event. And at this point, with the emphasis on Russia's cyber threat to the United States, I think the most likely scenario is they're going to shut down the Internet, claim that Russia did it, and launch the war before anybody can raise a hand and say, where's the evidence?
Well, talking about the third party, how do they know there was a third party? We're going back to the same situation with the Arab hijackers. If they use fake identities, how do you know where they were seated and who they were? It's the same thing here with the third party. How do they know which one is a third party?
They don't know. They don't know. They don't have facts and evidence. This is just the message they're trying to put on out. This is the lie they're trying to sell the American people with the assistance of the corporate media. You have to stop thinking that somewhere behind all of this nonsense coming out of that Senate hearing or the corporate media, that there's some rationality or truth or facts behind it. There isn't. It's all an illusion. They're saying whatever they think it's going to take. Yeah, it's all made up. They're just saying whatever they think they need to say to get you to go along with what they want to do, which is take more of your money for wars and send your children off to be killed and crippled in a battle against Russia.
Well, one last thing. I'm sure you're aware of that 22-year-old white boy that who had been beaten up and tortured for like 48 hours.
Yeah.
And Chicago PD refused to call it a hate crime. Apparently, they did an about-face, and now they consider it as being a hate crime. I mean, what kind of an animal would do something like this to anybody, regardless whether he's physically disabled or mentally disabled? What kind of a scumbag would do something like this? And they refused to call it. CNN actually shifted the blame on Donald Trump. Can you believe this absurdity?
Yes, I can believe it. That's what CNN's job is to do. To dismiss it, to say it's not a big deal, we got to go on supporting Black Lives Matter, and somehow it's all Donald Trump's fault because he's a white supremacist and a racist, and it was his hateful rhetoric that led to this. No, what led to this horrible, horrible tragedy in Chicago was an entire campaign year that was filled with race baiting and intentionally fomenting racial tension to exploit for the Hillary Clinton campaign. She was literally running a campaign saying, the whites are coming after you blacks, vote for me and I'll protect you. The straights are coming after the gays, vote for me and I'll protect you. The evil white male patriarchy is coming after the women and your abortion rights, vote for me and I'll protect you. None of which worked, of course.
Yeah, this is, like I said, watching CNN, they issue these inflammatory statements which actually incite rioting and incite to incidents such as this one in Chicago. And I was thinking, I said, don't these people have a journalistic responsibility to actually do the contrary, to calm down the spirits in case there is some genuine event like this happening. But these people seem to throw gasoline on the fire, given the fact that we already had some problems before Trump was elected and after Trump was elected, and it goes on and on and on. And these people don't seem to remember what journalistic integrity is and what their real job is. But anyway,
no, you've got it wrong. You've got it wrong. They understand their real job is to lie and control the American people. There's no journalism left in journalism school. It's like I was saying earlier in the show. It's how to do your makeup and hair and look convincing while you read a teleprompter. That's what passes for journalism today. You remember back during the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman trial, that whole murder and everything, and the whole week before the jury came back, the corporate media was out there saying, there's going to be race riots, there's going to be race riots, it'll be all across the country, race riots. And it didn't happen because the black people are just as smart as the white people and figured out that's clearly what the government wanted to have happen. And in the end, I remember seeing in the corporate media a photograph of a gentleman throwing a trash can through a window out in Los Angeles, and that was their illustration of the rage in the streets. And two things were immediately obvious. One is the trash can was brand new from the hardware store, had never actually seen trash, and right behind this guy in the photo is one of the trash cans made available on the street, which you cannot move. They're bolted into the pavement. That's why they had to bring their own trash can with them to stage this photo. And in an earlier time, people would have looked at it. They wouldn't have seen what was there. They just would have gone along with it. But today, everybody is suspicious, and they're looking at these pictures, and they're seeing the problems with them.
Talking about prostitutes, I was reading the news about Megyn Kelly. She turned down an offer from Fox News for $100 million. Can you imagine turning down $100 million?
That's not the story. That's not the story I heard. I heard she asked for $25 million, and Fox said no. And that's why she wound up going over to NBC, and she's taking a pay cut from what it was currently getting at Fox to be at NBC. Again, we're not going to get the straight story on it. And you know something? I really don't care. I don't really care what Megyn Kelly is up to because I don't listen to her anyway.
Anyway, she was a liberal in disguise. That's the way I see her, because she kept attacking Trump every occasion she had. But anyway, Mike, thanks again for taking my call, okay? And I wish you a very good day, and I hope you had a very good year, New Year.
Well, I've had a good, quiet New Year. Well, it wasn't quite a lot of fireworks going off, but Claire and I stayed at home because we don't want to be on the roads and everything. And, I can't claim that I didn't, show much temperance on New Year's Eve, but then that's what New Year's Eve is for. We're going to let you go here, and again, we might see over the next 4 years at least that the corporate media is going to shift more conservative purely out of a sense of survival and self-preservation. So we'll see what's going to happen with that. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network, and we're going to go back to the phones. Andy in Texas, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Hey, I just want your take on this. I mean, all these states had to get in the union somehow, and they all had to accept the Constitution as, the rule of law and whatnot. So with that in mind, how did all these states, with all the similar laws and codes and ordinances that they put up that violate the Constitution, how did they get around the Constitution to put all these laws, codes, and ordinances in effect? Because we've got millions of people in jail and prison for victimless crimes and whatnot. So I just want your take on that.
Well, I think the short version is that the federal government is ignoring the Constitution, and so they're really not going to make a case about constraining the states to the Constitution unless there's some political or economic gain to be made from it. It's basically kind of a nudge-nudge relationship where they're all out there saying, well, we'll pay lip service to the Constitution and all the rest of it, but we all know that they want to take away the guns. They've already taken away our privacy. And now they're starting to talk about curtailing freedom of speech to get rid of the scourge of fake news, because all those gosh darn independent media websites are pointing out every time that the corporate media lies, and if we can't lie, then we can't make our money, and if the government can't lie, it can't run the country, because they've been doing it so long they don't know any other way to run the business.
Well, I mean, most of these codes and ordinances are just extortion, you know. And then if you can't pay, boom, you go to a cage. And I, in my life, you know, zoo animals belong in a cage. Dogs who are stray that, you know, might get killed on the street might belong in a cage. But human beings.
Well,
the
counter. Well, for a traffic ticket, I agree. But those 4 individuals in Chicago, I think they're looking at some serious jail time, and they should anyway. But you're right. Civil fines for traffic and things like that have become just another way to loot and pillage the American people. You should see what the traffic fines are here in Hawaii, and it's absolutely insane. I'll give you just one example. If you're using your cell phone without an earpiece in your car, it's a $300 ticket. And there was a big stink a while ago where there was a water main break down in Honolulu, and the traffic was backed up for miles and not moving. Drivers had actually turned off their engines to just wait for the repair, and they were getting out their smart devices and catching up on email and stuff, and the cops were just walking down the row of cars writing out these $300 per shot tickets because the law is not written to recognize the fact that if you're sitting motionless, you know, it's a different thing than when you're actually driving. And it's just another way of raising money off the people. Hawaii may have to declare bankruptcy this year. Our tourism revenues are way, way down, despite what the Tourism Bureau would tell you, because TSA has just discouraged a lot of people from coming here. And we have paid a really, really high price in that regard.
Well, wouldn't that boost the economy if you could roll back these codes and ordinances that extort money out of our pockets? I mean, that certainly would boost the economy by probably billions of dollars a year, because I'm sure these cities are dragging in tons and tons of money. I mean,
yeah, but it goes right back.
Telling you how long your grass can be.
It goes right back on out, paying interest on all the debt to the private central bank. That's the real problem.
Or giving raises to the city council and whatnot. They do that.
There's a lot of that too.
They always vote themselves one.
Yeah. Okay.
Appreciate it, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. Going to switch over to Norm in Georgia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. I've been listening to you for a long time. Hey, I got a question for you. Did you hear about the several attempts at hacking into the Georgia voting database? And the IP addresses were traced back to DHS.
Yes. We reported on that. And it's funny, McCain isn't talking about that. McCain isn't talking about all the pro-Hillary fraud that the Jill Stein recounts uncovered. No, our job is to get Russia. Our job is to start a war with Russia. And you people are just being stubborn and refusing to go along.
Well, I mean, it's like they're suppressing the fact that DHS tried to hack into the Georgia voting database, but they're making a big deal out of the Russians. And I'm like, are you kidding me? It was DHS.
Well, again, even James Clapper was forced to admit there is no evidence that Russia hacked the election itself, and that's why they're trying to make a big deal over Russia hacked the DNC and Podesta emails, even though there's no evidence for that. And now they're changing the story to get around the fact that Assange keeps saying it's not Russia, by saying that Russia used a third-party cutout, and Assange didn't know he was acting as a Russian stooge. And it really, again, every time they change the story, they're only undermining their own credibility. They're in a credibility death spiral. There is not a thing they can do that's going to get any kind of trust or faith in corporate media or government back any time in the remainder of my lifetime, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, I was just curious why DHS would be trying to hack into the Georgia voting database.
Well, one theory is to plant evidence to make it look like Russia was hacking into the elections.
Yeah, but the IP addresses, they got caught red-handed.
Yeah, they didn't succeed. They were probably going to hack on in there and then leave a file, in Russian, saying, I rigged your election, hugs and kisses, yours truly, Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, I mean, this is just all crazy stuff. Well, thanks, Mike, for taking my call, and keep up the great work, and I listen to you every day.
All right, well, thank you very much, and thank you for the phone call. We're coming up on a commercial break. Before we get there, a quick little update on the situation with Craftsman Tools. Apparently, Stanley Black & Decker has agreed to purchase Craftsman. They're going to be building a new factory in the U.S. to make these tools because of the border tax issue raised by Donald Trump. And so if you have a Craftsman tool, I presume Stanley Black & Decker will be honoring those lifetime guarantees. We're going to take a break for commercials, back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Here we're going to go back to the phones real quick. We've got, let's see, Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Happy New Year, Mike.
Happy New Year. Happy 2017.
So I've been racking my brain about this UN abstention vote against Israel, and I was trying to think big picture, etc. But real quick, you mentioned the Craftsman tool import tax. Could you imagine if they taxed the drugs that the CIA is shipping in here? I mean, what a windfall that would be. As a side note.
Well, I think they ought to if they're, if they can't shut the CIA down from doing this kind of thing, then, charge them an import duty or something.
God, that would be a great way to kind of undermine their slush fund. So going back to the UN vote, I guess the only thing that I'm coming up with this insane Obama character is it seems like they're just flipping the chessboard over for Trump and leaving it for him to pick up the pieces.
That's a very good analogy, and in many ways that is exactly what they're doing, especially with regards to the immigration issue.
Right. So with that said, I listened to the show last night. In fact, I listen to every show, not to let that go to your head or anything, but the whole thing with the carriers coming back into port, don't you think that they would, from a tactical standpoint, rearm, re-up, refuel out at sea or in a port? We have a bunch of ports out there in the Middle East instead of bringing them home. It seems like there is a vulnerability component to this, or, exposure, and particularly with the caller from yesterday mentioning all the troops being sent over to Russia, it seems like there's a big hole in our defenses, and I'm certainly not a tactician, but it was a great show yesterday, and I love the fact that people are brainstorming and trying to connect the dots.
Well,
what do you think?
First of all, let me address the issue of underway replenishment. It's very time-consuming because they're sending things over one at a time on that rope tackle rig. It's very dangerous because you basically got these two ships very close together, having to maintain steerage so the current doesn't knock them into each other. And there's an upper weight limit on what you can send across on that line. It's one thing to be sending food and medical supplies, but sending over replacement missiles or parts for the fighter jets or even an entire replacement fighter jet cannot be done as an underway replenishment. In terms of replenishing in these foreign ports, it actually complicates the logistics because, first of all, you have to get whatever is being given to the carrier over to that foreign port, then get the carrier in there. And so it's certainly preferable to underway replenishment. Underway replenishment was developed to keep ships at sea once they're there and to keep them there longer if it wasn't possible to bring them back to port tactically. But it does seem like there's a real buildup going on, and I think that the reason those carriers are all in port is they're being brought to an enhanced state of readiness, new systems, and to be prepared for a prolonged stay at sea. That's really the only thing that makes sense. First of all, these ports are all in the continental United States except for the one in Japan. And nobody is going to be running a missile attack against U.S. territory. It would be tantamount to suicide. The U.S. would respond with nuclear weapons. And again, you need to remember, Putin is trying to avoid a war. Nobody wants a war other than the United States right now. The U.S. wants war to conquer the world, make them enslaved to the U.S. dollar, and Putin's history has been of trying to avoid these conflicts. He's the guy who negotiated the surrender of Syria's chemical weapons back when the U.S. was using the chemical weapons as their pretext to invade Syria and kick out Assad and install a puppet ruler. And Putin basically one-upped them by going on into Assad and say, you know, you might think about getting rid of these chemical weapons. You're not going to use them anyway because a weapon of mass destruction is a weapon of mass destruction. And current U.S. policy is an attack with the chemical weapons justifies a nuclear response. So...
Copy that.
Okay.
Yeah, well, have a good evening, Mike. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take 2 more phone calls, and then we're going to close the phone lines for the rest of the show because I got a bunch of news I need to get to. And we're going to go to John in northern Michigan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. You had a caller a couple of calls back that was wondering why they aren't following the Constitution. Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Oh, okay. And if this is just to give some people some idea why. John ran an article on the website, republicbroadcasting.org, over the holidays in regards to the loss of the 13th Amendment, and that protected us from having lawyers in office. And then after the Civil War, we were financially in distress, and the Rothschilds were brought in by the 41st Congress to help bail us out. And that's when they created the 10-mile district in Washington, D.C., and that is a corporate district, and we are running a parallel government to the Constitution with this corporation. And that's one thing I know Trump realizes we're dealing with, too. And so they don't really care about the Constitution because it's a corporation. They make their own rules, and that's what statutes are. Statutes aren't law. And until it's exposed, they use the Constitution when they need it. But in reality, the Act of 1871 and the Rothschilds rewriting everything changed the direction of our country.
Well, that, of course, the Rothschilds were brought in after Lincoln was assassinated and his greenbacks taken out of circulation because, again, when Lincoln announced the greenbacks, all of the established banking families of Europe reacted in horror at this idea of a government providing its own money and refusing to borrow it at interest from a private central bank. And it so angered those European banking families, Europe actually considered coming into the American Civil War on the side of the Confederacy. Britain and France actually talked about invading Washington, D.C., and the only reason they didn't was Russia literally protected the United States from Europe during the American Civil War. And, you know, we can get buried in all these statutes versus laws and everything, but we need to come back to some basic, easy-to-understand truths that we, the American people, have been fed this illusion about what this nation is supposed to be and what our rights are supposed to be, and then we discover that the government is, and corporate media and the bankers are just going their own way to line their own pockets at our expense, and anybody who stands up and says, I really don't like the way this is being done, is dealt with very, very harshly. And again, let's go back and look at the example of Vladimir Putin, because Russia and the U.S. were friends and everybody was buddy-buddy and we were sharing rides to the space station up until the day Vladimir Putin took direct control of Russia's central bank in order to run Russia's public currency as a public utility. That was the day that Russia and Putin went from being good friend of the United States to the top of the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list. And that's what dominates our history. If you read that article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, it lays it on out, how the history of the last 200 years is easy to understand when you realize the influence the bankers have over world events.
May I make one more comment?
Yes.
Michael? Well, if people go look at the 1871, it says, the act formed a corporation, the United States, all cap letters. And the founding fathers, they had the Constitution for the lowercase United States of America. But the new altered version was the Constitution of the United States of America, all in cap letters, and that was done by the Rothschilds, and that's what we're following today. And all of these lawyers, that article that John had on his on the website over the holidays, the 13th Amendment, and how it was totally destroyed in 1812.
Yes.
And that this that these lawyers that are in D.C. or in government at all should be totally eliminated from it, and that anything that pretty much has been implemented since 1812 dealing with lawyers is fraud, and that has to be changed.
There's a lot of fraud. I just want to make one statement. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Okay. And maybe this is because I was raised in a school system that taught us we had a constitutional republic with a democratically elected leadership. I do not recognize the authority of a corporation over my life. They can tootle around Washington, D.C. and imagine that they're running this country and they are masters of the American people, but in this one case, no, they're not. I don't recognize the authority of a corporation to run my life. Because corporations, like theocracies, are not responsive to the needs of the general civil population. Theocracies believe they are serving the imaginary playmate in the sky, and corporations serve profit. And so, no, in point of fact, I dare anybody to show my signature on a contract to a corporation saying I will abide by what the corporation says. Now then, one more phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I just turned on the news when I got home.
Yes.
And I see that an engine fell off a B-52 bomber.
Yeah, it's coming out of Minnow Air Base.
Yeah. So what you're saying with the condition of our, aircraft and our, other kind of weapons is that's pretty bad.
That is pretty bad. Now, the B-52 has 8 engines, so the loss of one, they got back to their base safely, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. You might be kind of amazed to see how few actual attachment points there are on a turbofan engine on an aircraft. And if you remember that terrible disaster with the DC-10 in Chicago some years ago, and it all came down to a single bolt that was holding the engine to the pylon. It was cracked. They hadn't magnafluxed it. It broke, and the engine just tore on off. And it was a horrible, horrible tragedy. It actually killed much of the top management of Playboy Enterprises at the time. They were on their way from the old Playboy Mansion in Chicago to the new Playboy Mansion out there in Holmby Hills, and unfortunately the plane fell out of the sky. And again, hang on, before we go, another illustration about not allowing safety decisions to be made by the money junkies, because the DC-10's cockpit did not have all of the safety features it could have had, and in particular what's called a stick shaker. And a stick shaker is a device where if the plane is approaching stall speed, it will shake the stick to just wake the pilot up and say, hey, deal with this right now. And the decision was made to have the stick shaker only on the pilot's control yoke and not on the co-pilot's control yoke. But when they lost the engine, they lost the power to one side of the cockpit, the pilot's side. And so the co-pilot was trying to fly a crippled airplane, and he didn't have the stick shaker, and that's why they stalled and went into that flat spin.
The other thing I wanted to ask you is I heard what you just said about Russia and the Civil War, and I've heard something about that before. But were they really strong enough at the time, Russia, to stop Britain and France if they wanted to do something like that?
They actually were. Well, all they had to do was, they had a lot of warships. They had Russia's Imperial Fleet, and they were a power projector of their age. And Russia had just abandoned its serfdom system and adopted an economic system modeled on the young United States. And they saw that economic system basically at risk and knew that if the bankers succeeded in overthrowing that economic system in the United States, they'd be coming after Russia next. So it was kind of a case of we're going to help the Americans because if we don't deal with this over there, we're going to be dealing with it on our own territory. And
have they sold us Alaska yet?
I'm sorry?
Had they sold us Alaska yet at that time?
No, I think no, they hadn't done that yet. I'm pretty sure that was a little bit later. But I'll double check that and put it into the timeline. I'm not sure it's really relevant.
They could have actually stopped the British coming through Canada if that was the case, and moving into.
Well, the British and French were going to be coming across the Atlantic. I mean, there were no Panama Canals or anything like that back then. So it really, for Europe to come after the United States, it would have been an Atlantic war. Although the Russians did, in fact, have ships off the west coast of the United States, and there are still remains of some of their fortifications and guard posts to be found along the coastline, and even over here on the island of Kauai, there's the remains of an old Russian fort.
I also heard that they helped us in the Revolutionary War. I don't know. Again, this is something I'd never heard this before, even when I was in school. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't. I did not come across that in my work. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines. Thank you for the call. I got a few things I want to hit before the end of the show today. Now, getting on to the issue of Leonard Peltier, who has been in prison for something like 40 years. He's been on good behavior. He's actually built up a credit of 20 years based on good behavior. So, in effect, under the rules of the system, he's been in prison for 60 years on this, over a crime that it seems very likely he didn't actually commit. And he's got a lot of people who are very sympathetic to his case. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Leonard Peltier story, there's a documentary called Incident at Oglala, which you can watch as a pay-per-view at YouTube. The incidents that led up to this whole thing were dramatized and fictionalized in a movie called Thunderheart, which starred Val Kilmer, and I think it was the best work, in my opinion, that he ever did. He did an excellent job there. So apparently over at the American University in Washington, D.C., somebody had set up last month a wooden statue of Leonard Peltier, and the university had issued a disclaimer saying this is an art installation. It's a piece of exhibited art, and we do not take a position on Leonard Peltier's case. Well, apparently, the Federal Bureau of Investigation Agents Association, which is where all the old FIBers go when they're through framing people, sent a very angry letter. So, how dare you dramatize this person? And the university has now taken this statue down, which is very, very, very petty indeed. See, the FBI doesn't want you reminded of all the things they've done wrong, like Leonard Peltier, James Earl Ray, throwing out the plans to the attack on Pearl Harbor in August of 1941, covering up for the murder of Vincent Foster. They don't want you to know that. They want you to think the FBI's that swell bunch of Joes that TV shows and movies will present to you. Now, interestingly enough, James Reynolds, who was the U.S. attorney whose office prosecuted Leonard Peltier, is saying it's time for him to be let out. 40 years is enough. The guy who prosecuted and put him away is saying, yeah, we got to let him go. Now, the story here is that there was a confrontation between federal agents and Native Americans on the Oglala Reservation. It led to a shootout between the two groups. One Native American was killed. 2 FBI agents were killed. There were 3 suspects, and 2 of them were tried and acquitted for an absence of evidence. Then Leonard Peltier was tried on the exact same evidence, but there was a tremendous amount of political pressure. We got to get somebody for this murder of FBI agents. We got to fry somebody. It would be helpful if we got the real guy, but it doesn't really matter. We just need to have it in the newspapers. We've sent this guy away for killing FBI agents. And it turns out much of that evidence was fraudulent. And, of course, the FBI and everybody involved in that case, except for this former prosecutor, are very defensive about it. They don't want to even hear that there's the least bit of doubt of Peltier's guilt. They don't want to even deal with the idea that they may have railroaded an innocent man into prison. It's certainly not going to be the first time. Same thing with James Earl Ray. The guy in the Lindbergh kidnapping, Hauptmann. He got railroaded in on the basis of faked-up evidence because there was a political need that we resolve this kidnapping. And I would, Obama was asked, Will you grant a pardon to Leonard Peltier? And Obama, who's set a record for pardons for drug criminals in the closing weeks of his term in office, doesn't want to touch it. Leonard Peltier is an embarrassment to the system, a wrongfully convicted man. And if he gets on out and he's able to document and prove that, it makes the U.S. government look bad. And we can't have the U.S. government looking bad. That's why we crush down all these independent media outlets. They're destroying the illusion of beautiful, infallible, perfect rulership. Actually, that illusion's been gone for a long time, but most of the people in D.C. still living in denial. Now, let's talk about some computer stuff. Ford has announced plans to have 20 million vehicles equipped with Amazon's Alexa, the smart assistant, by 2020. So you'll be talking to your car while you're driving down the road, and I think it's overkill. I want to start my car with a key. I don't want to have to talk to Alexa and have Alexa start my car for me. And, of course, it opens up another possibility, another vector for somebody to hack into a car and create mischief. Now, let's talk about ransomware, which may be some government's system of plundering computer users, because the NSA isn't doing a whole heck of a lot about it, are they? Now, the latest ransomware scam is targeting human resource departments. And since the federal government is rushing to hire up all these positions before Trump can come on in, maybe this would be a good place to forward this ransomware to. But basically, it comes in looking like a job application. There's a cover letter that says, I'm a good fit for whatever it is you're advertising. See the attachment. And the attachment is an Excel spreadsheet that only works if you turn macros on. And as I was saying last week, you should never have macros enabled on any Microsoft Office product, because that is how the mischief gets done. And so they're hitting all these human resource departments now. Now, there's another bizarre ransomware making the rounds, and this one is kind of interesting, and I think it's well-intentioned, because it grabs your machine and it encrypts it, but then it decrypts it after you go to a website to read an article on the dangers of ransomware. Then they give you your machine back. Good intention, poor execution, in my opinion. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today, and a very alert listener just wrote in with the exact time of the Alaska Russia deal, and Russia sold Alaska to the United States just 2 years after the conclusion of the Civil War. So that's how they line up on the timeline. We're talking about computers here. Story out of Blacklisted News, claiming that ultrasound tracking could be used to de-anonymize Tor users. And the theory put forward in the article is that if you are using Tor, which is this anonymous multi-route layered browser, then you visit a website, the website will actually send out ultrasonic sounds that can be picked up by your phone or tablet and sent back to track where you are. And I have to be very honest, this sounds like a big bluff to me. The government doesn't want you using any kind of anonymizers or proxies. They want you wide open for their nefarious gains here. But this looks like a bluff. I'm not buying into this one. Even the best computer speakers are not able to produce sounds above 20,000 hertz, which is the upper end of human hearing. Why make a speaker that can make sounds humans cannot hear? It's a pointless waste of money. Same thing with the microphones on your tablets and smartphones. Why make a microphone that can hear sounds that you, as a human being, cannot produce? I think it's a bluff. Now, there's another article coming out of RINF.com. Somebody apparently did a survey, and it's bad enough we've got the government spying on us all the time. But over in Great Britain, they ran a survey and found that 22% of British people admit to peeking into their partner's electronics devices, and very often they don't like what they find. Well, old Chinese proverb, if you don't want the answers, don't ask the questions. One of the things I'm very angry about with all this NSA spying, and it's manifesting here with this study, is the idea of personal privacy is being eroded away. where now, apparently in Great Britain, 22% of the people think it's okay to spy on their significant other. And I find that appalling. I mean, in our household, personal privacy, that's a matter of respect. I wouldn't even dream. I ask Claire's permission anytime I got to go into her phone and do anything. And she does the same here. We have areas where we have what we have and the other one doesn't come on in. It's just an issue of respect. And we're losing that. It's being taken away from us. This understanding that we should have respect for other people's privacy. Because if the government doesn't respect your privacy, why should you? Oh, go ahead. They want to turn us into a nation of snitches, just like Nazi Germany. Just run off and tell the Gestapo that somebody's got something in their phone. They have an unlicensed MP3. They have dirty pictures, so forth and so on. Anyway, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I got a bunch of stuff I got to do later today, and I'm going to get to it. We'll be back here tomorrow, Friday, on the Republic Broadcasting Network. The Lady Claire will be with us. So have a good evening, and remember, you are part of the independent media. Take what you learn here, what you learn from the website, share it with everybody that you know. Go gently. Don't trigger their defensive mechanisms. The art of a rabble-rouser is knowing what the rabble is ready to listen to. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.